We'll talk a little bit about guard dogs. I find guard dogs to be fascinating. Some people have really good luck using them. Some people have no luck at all. And basically, we need to we need to make these things successful. And there's a few things that if you keep in mind, you can basically become successful and avoid disasters. Guard dogs are useful in many places. In some, they're going to be absolutely essential. It's basically, a lot of people are not going to be raising sheep or goats without the use of guard dogs because the predator threats are just basically too high. It comes down to the biology, which is extremely important. These dogs are non-predatory, and in that sense, they're really different than other dogs. And this is why, basically, if you breed these dogs to other breeds of dogs, you have a problem because you're going to reinstate all that predatory drive, and you can end up with a real disaster. One of our previous deans had a dog that was half Kuvas and half Great Dane, and this is a cross between breed groups of dogs. This didn't work. I mean, basically, the dog started attacking horses. So you want the dogs to be non-predatory. Good guard dogs are non-predatory, but they're also territorial. And that works because when they're territorial, they're going to defend their territory. They're going to defend what they see is in their territory, and that's key to how they're going to work. The breeds vary. This variation is over quite a bit. Color, activity level, coat type, level of aggression, things like that. So when you're looking around, all the breeds vary, and between breeds, you're going to be able to find a dog that's going to work for you. But you should not discount the breeds as being important because some breeds, basically that average needle moves one direction or another depending on the breed. And so choose your breed carefully, choose your breeder carefully, and then raise the dog carefully. The Great Pyrenees is probably the most common in North America. These are big white dogs, pretty fluffy, fairly mild type of aggression. Uh, but they tend to talk a lot, so they actually bark a lot. Some people find that objectionable. The Anatolian Shepherd, Kangal, and the Akbash, these are the Turkish breeds, tend to be shorter haired and also tend to have a higher activity level and, in many cases, a higher level of aggression. So these dogs are very useful when the predator level is high or when you have certain predators such as wolves or bears, mountain lions, things like that. The Maremma and the Kuvas and the Komondor, these are other white dogs, um, variable coats and variable levels of aggression. On these dogs, you're going to have to choose your breeder, choose your dog quite carefully. Pyrenean Mastiff is a white dog with colored spots, black spots usually, a little bit more aggressive than the Great Pyrenees, even though it's probably related. The Ovcharkas are these Central Asian breeds, and usually they're fairly short-haired, but they also tend to have a fairly high level of aggression. And these are breed averages. You're going to find exceptional dogs in each breed, but you have to think about that when you're selecting a dog, especially if you're a novice at this and selecting for your first dog. We have Karakachans, which I imported from Bulgaria. Those are quite variable. The dogs we selected were specifically bred to be not all that reactive, not all that highly active, and with a low level of aggression. Others are much more aggressive, and those tend to be better for use out west where they have issues with wolves and with larger predators that are more of a threat than the coyotes and foxes are where we are. The breeds vary, the threats vary, the farm situations vary. All this means you need to match the breed to the situation. Choose the breeder, choose the dog for the best fit, and a good breeder is going to help you choose that dog. So you need to put all those pieces together, but it's also important to realize that success is half genetics. That means choose carefully, and half management, which means raise the dog wisely. Now, a lot of stuff that goes on the internet, when this thing doesn't work out, they'll blame the breeder, or if it's a breeder, they're going to blame the way the dog was raised. And really, it's half and half. The important consideration here is that each half has complete veto power over the other half. You can take a great dog and raise it poorly and end up with a disaster. But if you don't have the proper genetics, even the best management is not going to end up making a successful dog. So it's half genetics, half management. They're both essential to success. Genetics. A dog for wolves is different than a dog for foxes. Level of activity, level of aggression, level of territoriality. And so, you got to figure out where you are, what your threat is, what kind of dog you want. There's a lot of activity on my farm, a lot of people coming on. I need a safe dog, and my major threat is coyotes. So I need a fairly bland dog for that. If I lived somewhere else and had a different situation, I'd be able to withstand a much more aggressive dog because it wouldn't impact my safety. But if I have a bunch of people coming onto the farm, it might impact their safety. So, be aware of your situation, what your goals are, choose a dog wisely. The management side of it, the dog must bond to stock. You are much more interesting than sheep or goats are going to be because you're doing more interesting things. So the dog has to be left alone with the stock a great deal of the time, but you need to interact with it, when you feed it, when you're managing it, so that it's safe for you to manage. So it has to be safe for you and for your family. And that can be tricky, especially if only one person is the usual one managing the dog. So there's been a lot of different disaster stories of, for example, the wife usually managing the dog and the dog finding the husband to be a threat. You don't want that situation because sometimes that can be really quite dangerous for people. This whole relationship of dominance with the dog is tricky and subtle, and some people uh, use fairly aggressive techniques to assert their dominance. I've not had to do that. But you do want to have this dominance struggle, with a puppy and not with an adult. Basically, you want to start early, raise the dog to accept dominance of people, and you want to do that before the dog's an adult. So this is possible and basically contributes to your success with the dog. So if you do have a real fight with the dog, you can make the dog fearful and dangerous. So you don't want that. But at the same time, you want the dog to be trusting and submissive to you. It's a delicate tightrope, but you usually want to be encouraging and helping to form that dog into the submissive dog that you need and not fight it into the submission. Subtle cues are important. Does the dog accept all people in the family? Does it challenge certain family members? These are important issues. You can subtly reinforce dominance by mealtime practices. You're basically making them sit, making them wait. Most of these dogs are not going to be obedience school stars. That's basically just not how their brains work, and that's okay. But sit and wait, those are things that basically these dogs can handle, and it really is a subtle cue. At other times, sitting and accepting handling is important. If you pet a dog on the top of its head, you're basically signaling that you're dominant and the dog's accepting that. If the dog will only accept handling on its shoulder, he's basically sending you the signal that he's dominant. And so having all the family members able to, manage and manipulate the head of the dog, that's going to be important, especially as a puppy. And then as the dog gets up in age, and then if you can have different people in the family feeding the dog, that's going to help. And then not only feeding the dog, but making the dog sit and accept that it's going to sit and wait for those people. That can be important. We had one of the original males, the Carcachons that came in, was actually quite a dominant dog. And every now and again, we would have to, spend several days. We never had a fight with the dog, but we would spend several days making him sit, making him wait. And then that just subtly reasserted that everything was going to be fine and people were in charge. So we never had a fight with the dog because this dog was 120 pounds, fit, and quite dominant. And that fight would not have ended well for the person involved. So, use subtlety, but use it well. As far as is it working, that's the important thing. And the non-predatory piece is the key here. The dog and the sheep and the goats are going to tell you if this is working.